more barefoot. Forgot why she was barefoot. I felt sorry for her and hugged her. She hugged me after registering the hug. Kathy tenderly cried into my arms for 5 minutes. We knew that was her cry for help. David was ready to face James, but I urged him to call the police and warn their parents, who were better prepared. His parents were happy to have their daughter back and pledged to support her eternally. As shocked as we were by Kathy's many marriage assaults, the police stayed quiet during her statement. Despite threats and demonstrations, James was detained quickly. He denied blame for her miscarriage till the end, despite Kathy's discussions showed he poisoned her. In summary, James' mental condition and inability to stand trial. Judge condemned him to indefinite psychiatric care. It was frustrating, but we were delighted Kathy was okay. Now I had no anger for her. Female, I felt bad for her and wanted to forget our history to move on. After this, I wanted Kathy to recover. She appeared calmer and friendlier around me. To speed her rehabilitation, we introduced Tom when she was ready. We didn't mind her fast becoming close to Tom. My first red light should have been this. She surprised us at home without contacting to spend extra time with my son most weeks. She could drive because she was staying with David's parents. She was gracious enough to bathe and read Tom bedtime stories. However, her growing presence was unusual. Kathy would drop by unannounced almost daily. Always justify staying longer. She brought toys and presents to engage Tom. She also made strange comments about his clothes and hairstyle, suggesting me Tom would look better this way, or that, which alarmed me. I liked her attempts to bond with him, however. I felt like she was undercutting me again. My mom bear instinct came in when it was my son instead of her sibling. David suggested I was overthinking and his sister was dealing with her sadness. It broke my heart when he informed me she lost her child. So I let her. What's wrong with making her happy by caring for my son? Over time, I tried to adapt her presence in our home. She observed Tom at work every day and took him to the park at night. My son occasionally seemed less excited about me when I returned home. He watched me carefully and never ran to greet me. After Kathy left, I asked Tom about the day and if Kathy was okay, troubling him, yet he didn't participate. My cheerful boy appeared melancholy and less motivated. I concerned about his behavior shift as his mother, but my husband gently informed me I was thinking too much about irrelevant things when I tried to talk to him about it. David attempted to tell me it was all in my head and Tom was growing up. I told a coworker about my nagging feeling. He suggested I buy Amazon Nanny cameras for my son's room in our living room to watch Tom. I bought 2 cameras immediately after this wonderful idea. David didn't know because I didn't want him to disregard me again. I checked nanny cameras. Yesterday night after Tom slept. David was watching TV downstairs, so I watched audio-video in my study. First, Kathy cared for and played with Tom. She was good with kids. I was shocked when Kathy grabbed a book from her purse. We generally read our son age-appropriate stories in his room, but not this one. The book was read to Tom before his afternoon nap. As she recounted the story, I realized it was about adoption and how a mother may give up her child for care. Kathy narrated the story to my son, saying that she left Tom with me years ago because she wasn't ready. I gasped when she informed my child she will always be his mother and she loves him more than anyone else. She kissed his forehead and let him sleep. When I understood what she had been giving my son for God knows how long, which had made him act differently around me, my hands shook in wrath. This poor child must be confused and unsure of what to believe. I almost stormed downstairs and demanded my husband never let his sister in again, but stopped. Instead, I took the day off to be with my son and learn what Kathy had been brainwashing him with. Kathy freaked out and stated she loved my son when I told her she didn't have to babysit today, but I told her she should back off and I want the day with him. I said I was all right but needed a break when David inquired. I took my youngster to his favorite park for all-day play. We laughed and ate pizza all day. Before the conversation, I wanted my son to feel safe with me. He calmed down when I asked about his aunt and him. I told Tom he was safe and could talk to me about anything. My son was honest. He said Kathy tried for weeks to convince him she was his mother, but he didn't trust her. She said I would leave him because only true mothers love their children. Late. David's grandparents yelling at Kathy made me feel worse for ruining everyone's day. I left immediately and considered breaking up with David that night since I hated his sister. David apologized at my house with flowers and cake. He told me everyone blamed Kathy for disrespecting me, and that he threatened to break up with her, which made her cry. He told me he was sick of his sister's antics and didn't want anything to do with her. I was reassured that he defended me despite our long chat. In later days, David maintained his promise. Youngster claimed David knew everything. I asked Daddy about this, but he warned me not to tell you. I was heartbroken when I learned my spouse had protected his sister instead of our son despite knowing what she was doing. Everything was known to him. I barred my son from them. I didn't want my child to misunderstand and fear his mommy. As his mommy, I protected him. My stuff was packed quickly as I headed home. I informed my parents I was coming over, and that if David asked, we would claim I missed them and wanted to see them. Luckily, my parents are supportive and agreed immediately. I told my parents everything, and they're as shocked as I am by what Kathy has told my kid. David contacted me after getting home to an empty house, but I tried to sound normal, telling him I needed a work break from us. He was curious, but I agreed to stay with my parents for a few days. He probably didn't mind my unorthodox actions because we rarely argue. I'm conflicted now. No idea what to do. How should I proceed? AITA for separating my son and me from my husband's insane sister. Wow, almost 600 comments on my morning post. I'm surprised so many Reddit users noticed my post. By using false identities, I avoided David's relatives discovering it's about him. To people condemning me in the comments for not talking to my husband first, I would have talked to him if my kid hadn't told me he tried to talk to David when he found out. Call it my mother's instinct, but my spouse understood for weeks how my kid had changed. And behaving with me, but would gaslight me proves that a confrontation would have failed. My son is safer with my parents, therefore I wanted to take him quickly. His only concern is that no madman can deceive him. Kathy often writes to me about missing my son and wanting to meet him. This weekend at David's parents' place, I'll finish forever. For David's grandparents' visit, I planned this get-together weeks in advance. However, after recent incidents, I will speak up and guarantee Kathy never harms my son again. Back with update 2. I challenged David and Kathy during their scheduled family reunion. I was nervous, but I used the nanny cam to prove it. I publicly chastised Kathy at lunch. She tried to dismiss her surprise. After showing her the nanny cam, I told her I videotaped what she told my son. As I posted the video to the family group chat so everyone could see what I was talking about, she lost color. While trying to convince my son she was his mother, her parents were shocked. I then challenged David about not protecting our son. My spouse seemed guilty but stated he wanted to help his sister grieve. He didn't tell me about his sister's recovery despite his confused feelings. I told him his actions made me distrust him and could not let my son around him or his family again. First time in a while, my spouse cried, but I persisted. I told him I couldn't raise my boy where his dad wouldn't defend him to protect his mentally ill sister. David and Kathy's parents and grandparents apologized and vowed to keep Kathy away from our son. Kathy seemed embarrassed but never apologized. David justified his behavior, but I disregarded him. I left soon after this confrontation because I was done and didn't want to see them again. Update 3: Divorcing my hubby. I understand your confusion. Many of you advised me to give my husband a second opportunity since this wasn't his fault and David is a good man. Good men don't always make good fathers. His parenting of Tom wasn't great just because we never fought. Instead of hiding it for weeks and gaslighting me, he should have caught this when our son suspected. I and my son no longer trust him. After everything, Kathy returned to me because I pity her as a woman. But she proved I never liked her. Although Kathy's abuse was terrible, our son shouldn't pay for it. The grown-ass woman with mental illness had improved, we thought. My hubby amazed me, never be around Tom because he would choose her mental health before our son's. My husband was normally supportive, and I trusted him, but after what happened with Kathy, he clearly wanted to protect her more than us. My youngster will always be protected from now on. I can get full custody of my son by revealing his family history in court. My sister-in-law miscarried after years of animosity. We welcomed her back, but she claimed to be my child's mother. My husband David and I married 8 years ago. We have son Tom. The 4-year-old is fun and imaginative. Tom is a mama's boy and has always been close to me, which I don't mind because he'll have his own hobbies and may not want to see me as much as a teenager. David and I work well together and have the routines down for Tom and our careers. With a pleasant, communicative partner like David, I could achieve harmony. You suppose I have no Reddit complaints, right? I'm writing about my husband's sister. Kathy. Without revealing my bias, Kathy is difficult to get along with. Throughout my marriage to David, she has been cold to me. David told me at the outset of our relationship that his parents would approve, but that his sister Kathy, who has always protected him, would question me. He was right. She inquired about my family, childhood, and brothers on our first night. She ignored everything I said and kept her nose up. She casually likened David's ex-wives to myself. David was persuaded to join her girlfriends on a girls' trip at dinner, explaining he needed to clear his head before getting serious. David observed me growing angry and told his sister to be polite. For love of his sister, my husband stands up to her but is not very strict about his boundaries. She believes she can keep pushing the issue because she's the older sister and only wants what's best for him. Since our first dinner, I thought Kathy and I didn't get along. Though it hurt, I wouldn't strive to make someone adore me and accept me if they declined. I was polite to her when we met again, but she made it hard. I immediately recalled David's grandparents' anniversary party. David invited his family and me as his +1 after a year of dating. I liked how his family talked to me during the party and was casual and friendly. One person didn't say hello, Kathy. I avoided her after seeing it. His grandparents suggested a group photo today. Kathy loudly pointed me out and instructed me to leave as we stood. David raised his eyebrows when Kathy said she didn't want her brother Bimbo in this image and that he might break up with me. My face grew red in embarrassment as everyone looked uncomfortable. Kathy interrupted David's argument by saying I shouldn't have attended this event as a stranger. After hearing enough, I was ashamed. David attended multiple family events, and my family never treated him this way. I walked inside for my car keys. Her presence was no longer desired. The dad and David raced behind me to apologize. His mother tried to reunite us, but it was too late. He stopped seeing Kathy and returning her calls. He changed all his locks and asked his parents to talk to her so she could respect his privacy because she sometimes showed up uninvited at his place. Because his parents supported him, Kathy had to accept that her brother didn't want her. We expected her to regret her treatment of me, but the opposite happened. She threatened and blamed me for everything in her calls and texts. The cherry on top was when she demanded to meet me at work. Good thing my manager fired her. But I was shaken. I told David I had to break up to sue his insane sister. For pestering me, sue her. David wept, requested me to let him mend it. After convincing his parents, Mike and Kathy had their goodbye at their place. His parents stopped communicating with her after seeing what she was doing to me. David and his parents informed Kathy her behavior was bordering crazy and supported my lawsuit. Kathy broke down and requested help. She told them she was spiraling and couldn't stop. She also acknowledged her months-long unemployment hurt her mental health. Lucky for David, her parents immediately admitted her to a psychiatric clinic for extensive surveillance. Kathy granted David's plea to cease talking. I thought her apology was half-hearted, but I hoped she would recover. David and I married. Kathy was rejected despite her discharge and accomplishment. Everyone respected my decision to avoid her. I liked her flowers on my happy day. Soon after our honeymoon, Kathy announced her wedding. Her dating status was unknown, but we were delighted for her until we found out. Realized she was dating a psychiatric hospital buddy. To clarify, this person, doctors characterized James as schizophrenic, drunken, and volatile. News worried David and Kathy's parents. Kathy announced she will marry David next month without me. I expected it and was glad she didn't invite me because it saved me time making an excuse. My husband didn't attend the wedding since his sister invited him instead of me. Afterward, guests called their wedding a nightmare. Kathy and James were inebriated and couldn't repeat the priest's remarks. James kept drinking, was hesitant to ask me because she thought I would expel him. Loved me, didn't want to live with Kathy. I felt sad for him as I watched him cry after those statements. He seemed little and helpless, unlike the lively, cheery kid I knew. I dropped to his level and gently took his hands in mine, assuring him everything would be fine. Together we'd triumph. Hugged him tightly. His worries and pain. I felt bad for not safeguarding my son from this psychopath. He didn't have to worry since David and I would manage it. However, my blackout drunk at the reception, he ripped up his shirt and pants as everyone looked on in dread. James attacked an innocent bystander who was looking at a server at the event, saying it looked unusual and was hiding something due to his schizophrenia. James' family comforted him and paid the server to drop charges. The episode traumatized everyone and raised concerns about Kathy's safety. What made her think James wouldn't attack her if he could attack a stranger? Dave and his parents tried to quietly discuss her husband's strange behavior with Kathy, but Kathy believed she could repair him. Even though her parents warned her about red indicators, she believed James would. Over time. David and his parents tried to reach Kathy, but James would keep her quiet. Kathy wouldn't take help, so we couldn't sue. We heard neighbors call police twice because they heard them fighting. Kathy felt certain he was her mate. 4 years ago, I got pregnant with Tom. Everyone was thrilled. We invited Kathy to my baby shower. Due to her silence, David drove to her residence to check on her. James had cut off contact and tossed away our invitation to keep her away. No. Whatever happened, David was furious, so he and James had a few heated words that didn't go anywhere because Kathy didn't think her husband was wrong. David left in frustration and she never returned. Even after Tom was born, we never spoke to her. Her parents stopped trying to convince her. Everyone prayed for her safety. The years after Tom's birth were peaceful and loving. I never had major concerns with David. We now have a good marriage rhythm and understanding. Tom, keeping us entertained with his shenanigans. David's parents babysit every weekend while we have date night. We can relax while the grandparents play with Tom. Until 8 months ago, Kathy arrived at our doorway dirty. Unshod, she had dirty feet. We let her in immediately and I hurried to grab her a blanket because she was freezing. We didn't know because we hadn't seen her in years. Say what? David massaged her hair and asked if she was okay. Standing still, Kathy stared at nothing. She informed us she miscarried. We were shocked when she informed us she was expecting a month earlier and thought James would be happy. He was initially, but over the weeks he worried this youngster would take her and make her hate him. He threatened to put rat poison in her food to make her lose the child during fights. Kathy woke up uneasy and went to the clinic to learn she lost her child. Too sick and numb to drive, she walked home. Mind led her to our house, but she traveled 20 blocks.